So today we are going to talk about what's blockchain, what is Bitcoin, and what is crypto. And just as a funny side note, it really is providing unimpeachable control authority over your digital assets to countervail oppressors. There's a admiral in the U.S. Space Force that his language is this around how it's such a tool for peace that sooner rather than later, the entire world will start to leverage Bitcoin, adversaries and allies alike, because it's an unstoppable force for good, where as we'll see in the presentation today. So as we get started here, I am not an expert. This presentation is based on the best of my knowledge. There's no advice, and you should all educate yourself further. But it is something that I care deeply about because as you'll see, when we look at this, it really comes down to two questions. What is money and who can you trust? And these are fundamental principles that guide humanity and have since the dawn of civilization. And the next question is, how do our belief systems influence our reality? And specifically, if you look at our government, it is a belief system. It is a mechanism that's been created to try to ward off violence and provide more security and safety. But it is just that. And we all live in different countries and we all have different systems to our society and to our belief. But we all share the same humanity. So these are fundamental foundational questions that really gave rise to blockchain, Bitcoin, and else. So when we look at money, which we covered this previously, it's really about hard money backed by physical goods. And it goes back 5,000 years where gold was the standard. And times were pretty good. If you go and ask any of our grandparents or great-grandparents, what do you do with your money? Save it, is what their advice was. And that's because gold is hard. Only 2% growth every year from new gold being found. All the gold that's ever been mined by the Egyptians, by any civilization, still exists today as gold. It doesn't deteriorate. It's a great money, but it's really heavy and really dense, and it's hard to transport over space. You can't easily pay for something over the internet using gold. So there is a need. But when you look at what is sound money and what's going to make a better money, there's certain principles. And boy, there's a lot of them here. But you got to be able to verify that it's real money. Fungibility is actually about privacy. It's got to be portable. It's got to be durable and last. It's got to be able to be divisible. So it's not just one big bar of gold. You can give a little nugget of gold. It's got to be scarce so that somebody can't just dump supply and devalue it. It's got to be established. We'd prefer it's uncensorable so somebody can't stop you from being able to spend your money. And in order to counterfeit it, it's got to be really costly and hard. So these are principles of sound money. And then when we get to looking at money, here's what is mind-blowing. If you look at how fast technology has changed the world, you can farm and yield so much more food in less time for less cost of production. Why do things continually increase in cost? It's a fundamental principle. And it's mind-blowing that very few things reduce in cost, like computers. Most things continually increase in costs. Our housing, our cars, our food, our energy. And this is a question that really has an answer, and it's the invention of fiat money. And fiat money really has only been used in the last 50 years. It was created by the US, the Great British Pound, a long time ago to fund World War I without increasing a tax. But it really came to be in 1971 when the US went off the gold standard, where the world fundamentally changed and the fiat money backed by nothing can be controlled by the US government that can help influence the petrodollar and the power structure of the rest of the world. So it's debt-based. This is really important because new dollars aren't created. New debt is created, and it's represented in form of an IOU to a dollar. It's by design to be inflated. When we talk about increasing costs, this is because Keynesian economics and the principle that central banks should control money and they should print money. But because of that, it's easily corruptible. You look at the bailouts, you look at the wars, you look at the funding that goes into legislation that's called pork, that's extra money that just gets spent. But more than anything, this fiat money requires trust. Trust specifically in our banks and our government. And in the 1930s, there was a run on the banks. People went to go withdraw their money, and guess what? The bank said, we don't have your money. This happened again with this FTX international exchange recently. Bank runs are not new, but the whole fiat principle is that it's based on debt and also fractional reserve banking, which are fundamental problems, just a ticking time bomb ready to explode. IOUs are not as good as money. And if you watch Dumb and Dumber, $275,000 for a car, might want to hang on to that one. IOUs require trust, and trust is something that throughout human history has shown to be an Achilles heel. Every fiat currency, even those in the last 50 years, have lost almost 100% of its value, and it's by design. What's happening in Argentina, in Lebanon, what's happening around the world is that governments are printing money, debasing their currency, and it really creates a separation between rich and poor, where the wealthy are accumulating more money that's being printed, and those that aren't wealthy have to pay more for things, and life is harder and more of a struggle, and that money gets funneled up. You can see it in the grocery store. You go to the grocery store, and 90% of the products are from 6 companies. The same 6 companies own all of that. This fiat money, I believe, is the greatest tool of oppression ever created. And with that said, since 1970, when we went off the gold standard, you look at the supply of money. This is called M2. This is print money that the government's created. It is on an upward slope, exponentially upward slope since 1970. When you look at the world, over 4 billion people live under authoritarian regimes, and they don't even have any property rights. They don't have banks. They don't have a way to secure their property. And the US dollar as the global reserve currency has created this dependency of these smaller, unwealthy nations to the US, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. This is the largest racket ever created. They intentionally structured debt for these nations to keep them just above the line of poverty. This money is spent on infrastructure in those countries that benefit the United States and Western governments to take their food, to take their fishing, to take their farming, and to be able to purchase it at below market prices, build goods at home, and sell it back to these countries at above market prices. And you can see, since we went off of the gold standard, debt from developing countries has skyrocketed to a staggering amount, and it makes sure these countries can't get out of poverty. That debt payment becomes the largest obligation. Actually, this year in 2023, the largest expense in the US budget is going to be the interest on the national debt, but it's still small compared to what a lot of these other developing countries face. So money is the nucleus of a functioning society. It's the worth we see in ourselves. It's the connection we have with others. It's the reason all of us are here on this call to work with Outflow to achieve something greater together. And the currency is money that brings us all together doing it. And the world needs a better money. That has been something we've been looking for a long time. But why now? Because the world has changed fast. Their internet, this concept of open source software where you can verify these programs that are running and to be able to contribute it to your own. This public key cryptography is a very big advancement in mathematics that helps scramble information, but also create verifiable information that can be changed. Distributed computing systems. You probably need a computer science degree to really understand this, but being able to run computers to communicate together at mass scale is a very hard problem that's been solved. And then there's this little thing created by the National Security Agency called the SHA-256 hash, which we'll get into a little later. All of these came together to create what's now looks like could be the best form of money that we've seen. Public key cryptography is a real simple concept. You have a private key that you keep secret. You have a public key you give to everybody. Anybody can send you a message that can't be intercepted by using your public key. Nobody can read it, but using your private key, you can unscramble it and see what people say. This is what's used on the internet today, but it was very controversial when it first came out. In 1994, this gentleman, Phil Zimmerman, created what's called PGP, Pretty Good Privacy. And the United States government sued him because they couldn't snoop on phone calls, on emails, on different things because of this encryption. And they freaked out and thought, this can't get into the hands of the bad guys. We can't allow this. And they sued Phil Zimmermann and put a stop to the distribution of his software, claiming that this is weapons grade munitions that cannot be exported. It violates an export treaty. And Phil Zimmermann and his legal team went and they said, software is First Amendment rights. At MIT, people were printing the software code on their shirts as a statement saying software is free speech. And this legal argument drug out for quite a bit of time. And interestingly enough, in the United States, there's what's called the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms, which the fundamental principle is that you should be able to protect yourself against an exploitative government. And as soon as they moved to the Second Amendment argument that this encryption was a weapon, this was a munitions, weapons, military grade munitions, the US actually dropped its suit. And they were able to continue to distribute this encryption software on the basis that the Second Amendment protects it. Very interesting. But when we look at the SHA-256 hash, you can take any information and create a mathematically perfect digital signature of it. So this is scrambled, you don't know what it is, and there's a process to get back to what this information is in your private key. This is what has been used to really create the first blockchain. So you don't need to know much more about it than that. But then when we're getting into distributed systems and computing, trust is a big problem. And this problem, called the Byzantine generals problem, in 1982, the leading mathematicians in the world said this problem can never be solved. They said you need to have commanders, lieutenants, and this hierarchy of a power and trust infrastructure in order to be able to solve the problem. Well, what's the problem? It is specifically that there's a group of generals that need to attack a city. The problem is their messages are intercepted and there's liars that are going to say the wrong thing. And they need to be able to time their attack to all know at the exact same time, if they can do that attack, they will succeed. If they can't coordinate at the same time, their attack will fail. This is the problem they said will never be solved until Satoshi Nakamoto, who is the creator, he's pseudonymous. Nobody knows who he is. It's probably many people. Their true identity has never been revealed. They created the Bitcoin white paper in 2009, and they designed the first blockchain database, which solved this Byzantine general problem. And it solved it by requiring work to verify information. And this proof of work, which we'll see a little later, is transformational technology that is a bridge between the physical world and the cyber world, where in order to participate in the cyber world, there is a real world penalty of watts of energy being used that must be expended. And the more that's participating in this network, the more work is required to verify, the more energy is required, the harder it is to attack, the harder it is to cheat. And their fundamental cost benefit analysis shows that it's just better for you to participate in the network than to fight against it and try to cheat. Try to do the double spend your coin. So this person showed up out of nowhere, gave their source code to the world. It's open source. They disappeared. They never took any coins. They gave this technology to the world that's transformational and fundamental. And there's no creator, no issuer. It's unique. It's first of its kind. It's not the first internet money. Internet money has been a thing going back years and years and years and years and years. This is the first internet money that worked. It's a blockchain that is a trustless way to share information, share and confirm information. It's a distributed ledger where it's signed, verified, time-stamped information. I actually tried to call it the time chain at first because it's really about solving the issue of what's happening at what time and how can you verify it. But this information is batched into blocks. These blocks are accepted and verified and distributed and confirmed. And what happens if you don't know, if you get a fake block and a real block? There's this consensus that's called this proof of work. We'll get into it a little bit more. But this is the very first blockchain that was ever created. Since then, it's been copied a bunch of times. It really looks simply like this. You have blocks. You have transaction of X paid Y a Bitcoin, Y paid Z 2 Bitcoins. It's hashed. And the Genesis block doesn't have a previous block. But that's verified. 10 minutes later, these transactions get verified. No magic to it. It's very simple, but it's very profound. When you look at a distributed blockchain, it's the exact same ledger spread across multiple different computers, multiple databases. These databases are connected all around the world, And the proof of work is used to secure the ledger and ensure every single node has the exact same ledger, and you know exactly what's been spent and what balances are. But the fundamental question again is why blockchain? It's rules over rulers. Just like the Constitution creates a democratic government. It's about rules over rulers, but obviously in human systems, they can be corrupted. In math systems, they can't. So this is a decentralized ledger. It requires trusting nobody. I can send anybody here Bitcoin without needing to trust anyone, without needing a third party to approve it, without needing anyone else involved. And once I've sent it, it will never be changed. It's immutable. So the blockchain is a great leap forward. And Bitcoin was the first blockchain, and it was titled Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash. And this white paper, I remember the moment I read it, it blew my mind at how beautiful and elegant the technology is, but also how simple it is. It took 9 pages to change the world. And the Genesis block here references the January 2009 bank bailouts. So you can see that what is money really came to create what is Bitcoin. When you look at it, it is the first use case for a blockchain. It's a trustless monetary network. It's an open ledger. Now think about this. You can look at the Bitcoin blockchain and see every transaction that's ever happened. People do it all the time. Imagine going into your bank and say, hey, can you just give me all your transactions so I can see that you're solvent? No bank will do that. The emperor has no clothes. The Bitcoin, it also creates a fixed supply. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. There will never be more. We cannot inflate the currency. We can't debase it. The only thing we can do is learn to live with it. It does convert energy into digital property. The United States regulatory climate does clearly treat Bitcoin as a commodity. It is not a security. What's the difference? A security is registered by the Securities and Exchange Commission. To be a security, you must, or to not be a security, you must pass the Howey test. And that's basically, is there someone in charge? Is there a group in charge that can corrupt it? And in the case of Bitcoin, no, it's not. It's clearly property. It's a commodity. It's got clear tax law. It's got clear precedent for a legal framework. It's also a bearer instrument with real-time settlement. Now, this is important because our current fiat system is all debt-based. When you get a dollar, it's an IOU, and you owe me something. And that debt will accrue, and the interest will accrue, and you can enslave a lot of people with debt. With this, when you send Bitcoin, it is really Bitcoin that's going from me to you, you to me. The settlement is the actual asset itself. It's not some payback later. When you swipe your card at the grocery store, there's this whole collection of banks that have to make promises to each other. And oftentimes after 2 weeks, finally the money gets settled. 2 weeks. And all these middlemen that are shaving off the top, stealing our money, making things more expensive. Where this Bitcoin is a bearer instrument, real-time settlement, and it's a beautifully open source software. There will only ever be 21 million. If you want to know what's the worth of the world, you put this infinity in the numerator and you can divide it. And I know we're not all mathematicians here, but what this means is that each item in here that we value will be much larger in number. The value of it will be much more significant in number when we limit it to 21 million ways to measure it. When you look at the Bitcoin network, there's some key stakeholders. There's your users, which really have wallets and balances. There's node operators that just keepers of truth. They keep the ledger. They share it amongst themselves. Every node has the exact same ledger. There's over 15,000 nodes in the world. I'm running one on this laptop right now, and they are the keepers of truth. And then you have Bitcoin. Oh, and these node operators, this is a fundamental principle that you can get a Raspberry Pi, an $80 computer, and run your own Bitcoin node. You can secure your own money and trust no one with an $80 computer. You can run a node on your phone. You can run it on a Nintendo Entertainment Center. They intentionally made it so that it's very easy to operate a node. That opens up freedom. It opens up decentralization. They actually went through what was called the block size wars, where they wanted to make it so it was really expensive computing equipment was required to run a node, and the nodes won. The miners are different. These are mercenaries, and they have an economic incentive. They are paid in order to run these hashing puzzles and try to solve these problems for this proof of work, to then give transactions back to the nodes that say, yep, these are legit. We all agree on it. We have a consensus. And these miners do a lot of work in hopes that they're going to be paid in newly minted Bitcoin or in transaction fees. So there's massive industries that are created from this mining network. And then there's the software developers that can add features over time, and it is open source software, but all of these are stakeholders in the Bitcoin network. And it's worth noting that these stakeholders have kept the Bitcoin network secure since 2009. There's been zero hacks. There's been zero downtime. Every 10 minutes, a new block is created. And all around the world, anybody that wants to participate in Bitcoin, as long as they have internet access, can do so. The Bitcoin wallet is really just a private key. It's one file. That's it. And you can actually lose your private key as long as you know your seed phrase. This can be as few as 12 words. This is transformational in the world. And we'll get to a little later where people who are threatened, when their physical safety is threatened, all their possessions can be stolen and taken by somebody with more money. They don't have control authority over their assets. If they can remember 12 words, they can keep their Bitcoin in their head and escape North Korea and start a new life and take their assets with them that couldn't have been stolen by the government. There's many other types of wallets like multi-sig. In our case at Outflow, we can have an expense setup where multiple people have to sign off on it. So a transaction can't be spent unless I sign it, Matt signs it, Manu signs it, whoever signs it. This multi-sig creates all new possibilities for balancing without requiring trust. It's principles, not trust. There's custodial and non-custodial. This is important because custody is, where is the asset? And if you are trusting a third party, then you don't own Bitcoin, you own an IOU. So if you have your money on if you have your Bitcoin on Coinbase, on FTX, on any of these exchanges, that's not your Bitcoin. That's their Bitcoin. If they go bankrupt, their creditors get your Bitcoin before you get it. So it's really important to take custody of your own. And when you look at custody of your own, there's two principles of hot and cold. A hot wallet is something that's connected to the internet that can be hacked into and stolen. High risk, but very convenient. A cold wallet is something that's not connected to the internet. I have a USB device that's a cold wallet that holds all my valuable Bitcoin. It's secured. I have my seed phrase stamped on titanium. It's impervious to acid, to earthquakes, to floods. And I've got the seed phrase distributed in 2 different places to try to secure that money. But the Bitcoin wallet is really the start of a user's journey into Bitcoin. And it's really easy to think about it as securing one file or remembering 12 words. If you can remember 12 words, or if you can secure one file, you can have a secure Bitcoin wallet that holds all your money and the banks can't steal it from you. So self-custody is what I just described. There's a principle of not your keys, it's not your coins. You need to have the Bitcoin secured with your own keys. You need to protect those keys at all costs. And you can trust people, but why don't you verify what they're saying is true? Trust, but verify. And running your own Bitcoin node and connecting it to your wallet can help you verify every single transaction in the most private way. And the leading advice on using exchanges is use them like public restrooms. Get in, do your business, and get out. Do not leave your money on exchanges. All of the big hacks and fraud and theft that's happened, most of it has been exchanges, either founders disappearing. There was an exchange in Canada where the guy just left in the middle of the night and stole $15 billion. FTX recently, Mt. Gox. It happens over and over. Humans are not to be trusted. They're great, but they're not trusted. So how does the trust and consensus work? Well, a user can decide if they want to pay more to get their things secured faster, they can. That pays the miners more money. But they sign it, they send it, their transaction sent to every node in the network. The nodes give it to the miners. The miners do this competition to create these incredibly difficult puzzles that are solved that take a lot of energy. The miners that successfully achieve the puzzle return this information back to the nodes. The nodes validate it, and then it's added to the ledger. So this whole dance is basically a way to make sure that before something is verified, a lot of work went into verifying it, and therefore it's more likely to trust that that information is accurate and correct. There's a few features of Bitcoin that are interesting. So miner rewards. So it incentivizes security. Right now, the most secure computer network in the world is Bitcoin. No nation state has a computer network that's more powerful than the Bitcoin network exists today. It hash rate's at an all-time high, and the more miners there are, the more secure it is. Because there's what's called a 51% attack. The Byzantine general problem has one assumption in the solution. And that's that there's at least one more good guy than bad guy. We have 51% of people are good, at least. All the others can lie and be frauds. As long as we got 51%, we have a secure network. And as we go, every 10 minutes a block is created. And every 2 weeks, the software automatically changes the difficulty. If there's way too much computing capacity, it increases the difficulty of the problems that the miners solve, which requires more money, more watts, more energy to secure it. If the miners, like China banned mining last year, 50% of the miners dropped, the hash rate dropped, the difficulty became much easier, and it became cheaper to produce Bitcoin. So this is a very interesting economy here. But every 4 years, every 210,000 blocks, the number of new Bitcoin created drops in half. It's called the halvening, and it's going to happen until the year 2140. I think we've had our fourth halving. We have another one coming up in 2 years, but this creates this reduction in supply that helps increase demand and maintain price stabilization. And then, of course, it's universally accessible. Like I said, on a Raspberry Pi, you can run your own node. The risks, 51% attack, social engineering or not having information security, and then regulatory and legal uncertainty. I know we're close on time. I want to get into energy use because this is one, there's been a coordinated attack against Bitcoin to say it can't be used as money because it uses too much energy. This is a conspiracy. It's by the existing power structure, because what really happens with mining is you're saving energy. You're finding energy that would be wasted. When they're mining for oil, they have this natural gas that comes out automatically. And now these companies are starting to, instead of flaring the gas and letting it just burn into the atmosphere, they're putting Bitcoin miners on it to capture that energy to create more Bitcoin. It secures the network. It helps make the company that's doing the exploration more profitable. And it's helped save that natural gas from being flared into the atmosphere and burned. It also, mining is such that you can turn it on, turn it off. It doesn't matter. So in Texas, they've really embraced this. They had a major grid problem during the winter where there wasn't enough power for the houses. In this case, the Bitcoin mining can all turn off instantly. It doesn't matter. Energy goes to all the homes. As soon as the homes come back online and the energy demand drops, that extra supply that's been there that you need to stabilize the grid can be redirected to mining Bitcoin instead of shut off. And for this reason, it is a very fierce competition to find wasted energy, renewable energy, cheap energy, invest in that infrastructure to take decades of advancement in a very small window of time, because Bitcoin mining creates the economic incentive for all sorts of organizations to help reduce energy loss, maximize energy efficiency, and every single energy company now today, BP, Chevron, oil, you name a big energy company, they are all mining Bitcoin today, every one of them. And their state of Texas is investing in Bitcoin mining. Then you look at the energy usage, it is a lot, but it's less than what the US does during Christmas with Christmas lights. It's less than is used to dry your socks in your clothes dryer. It is orders of magnitude less than what's used in mining gold. So the energy use argument is something that it's actually a net positive for the environment and for humanity than it is. And when we look at what is a good trait of money, you can just look at Bitcoin really checks every box as every principle. It's better than gold and it's better than fiat. Anything's better than fiat. An IOU is not money. So we look at money, but the more important thing is human rights. And the world has a lot of stains, and there's been some progress and some good movement. But a couple stories here I'll share real quick. Central Africa, actually several nations in Africa, they were colonies of France, and France left. That's great. But France required the central bank of France to still supply the money. They have the fiat money, and the organizations that are against France's influence in the economies get shut off from the bank. When you can't use your money, you can't operate as an organization. So I've got videos I will share of individuals that tell their story about how they can leave oppression, and they've leveraged the Bitcoin network to be able to transact their business without being beholden to central banks like France or organizations that are oppressing people. And it's happening in Palestine, it's happening in North Korea, it's happening in Lebanon. I wish I could spend a lot more time on this, because Bitcoin is freedom more than it's money. People think about investing in Bitcoin and price goes up. No, you invest in Bitcoin, freedom goes up. Most people in the world can't get a merchant account to run a business. Most people in the world can't accept money for their goods and services. That's crazy. Everybody in the world can accept Bitcoin. There's no barrier to entry other than internet access. And that's an important point that we do need to talk about. Above all nations is humanity. And that is where Bitcoin leads us. Now I want to talk about crypto very briefly. The perception is that Bitcoin is a part of crypto ecosystem. The reality is crypto is a barnacle of human interest, theft, fraud, perpetrators of oppression, and people that want get-rich-quick schemes. Bitcoin is a beautiful technology based on math. Crypto is a human influence tool of oppression to part money from people. Ethereum was the first, and where there's a beautiful technology in smart contracts, the decentralized applications, what were called ERC20 tokens in 2017, Kim Kardashian, Floyd Mayweather, they were all in on the fraud of creating ICOs and launching companies and stealing money from people. Ethereum's run by a foundation. They actually had a hack where somebody was able to take some money from the foundation, and guess what? They had a vote. What do? 4% of people voted. 4% of people voted, and they forked. They broke the chain. You can't trust an organization to control a network. They forked. Now you can see ETC and ETH are traded differently. That's why they were hacked. Now they moved to a proof of stake model. Proof of stake is the opposite of proof of work, but proof of stake is you have more money, you have more influence. It's a violation of the principle of trust. You can't trust an organization that stakes things. When you look at altcoins, they really spun out of Ethereum, and there's over 20,000 now. Most are unregulated securities. They're controlled by an individual. The price can be manipulated, and they are just rife with Ponzi's and frauds. And that's what you've seen in this world. That's why I thought it was important to have this talk today, is because people are smearing the issues today. FTX lost over $10 billion of people's money. It wasn't because of crypto. It wasn't because of Bitcoin. It was because of fraud, good old fashioned human fraud. And if you go into the crypto game and you think crypto and Bitcoin are the same, you are susceptible to fraud because it's backed by nothing. It's a big Ponzi. Anytime there's yield involved, you're the yield. The yield is new money coming in. In Bitcoin, it requires watts and energy usage and power and intentionality to mint new Bitcoin. In crypto, it just requires a huckster with a story, and people are stealing money all over the world. The next big fraud that's about to interact with the world is called the central bank digital currency. These are not good. These are the government tracking every transaction. Who can you trust? I don't trust the government with tracking my transactions, my family transactions. It's censorable. Like in Canada, there was truckers that whether you agree with them or not, there were truckers that organized, and guess what? The bank shut down their account. The bank shut down the accounts of people that gave them money. It's crazy. Black Lives Matter. People are getting their bank account shut down because they're standing up for a principle they believe in. Central bank digital currencies make that problem 1,000,000 times worse and instantaneous. You still can't trust a central bank. You can't rely on what they're saying. You can't rely on them to be solvent because they rely on what's called fractional reserve banking. That's where you put your deposits in the bank and they give it to other people to make money. And when you go back for your deposits, it's gone. It's a fundamental problem that Bitcoin fixes, but it's also about human rights. And when you look at altcoins and crypto, there are exactly zero stories, zero of altcoins strengthening human rights. There's some about votes. There's some things of digital identity. There's some progress being made, but it's mostly get rich quick schemes, NFTs, decentralized finance, Ponzi coins, on and on. Crypto is not Bitcoin, but more than anything, you also need to be wary of centralized exchanges. These are crypto casinos. These are what's failing. It's an on-ramp where you can exchange your fiat, your dollars for crypto, but they own your assets and you have an IOU. And they're not regulated. The legal environment's changing. They're all in bed with each other. And when one fails, another dozen come off and fail. It's terrible. It's horrible. And they're also the old guard of fractional reserve. So in the end, know that compound interest is really what we're about. And when we invest in fiat currency, we are the victim of it. And when we invest and look at Bitcoin, we can be a beneficiary of it. So I know it's a passion. Thank you, everybody. I wish we had more time to answer more questions, but hopefully this gives the guidance that blockchain, Bitcoin, crypto are related, but fundamentally different when you look at it as what's money and what's right and what's just and who do you trust.